Min-jae stood frozen at Incheon Airport's VIP terminal, eyes locked on a small boy holding a woman's hand. The boy looked about 6 years old. He had Min-jae's jaw. He had Min-jae's eyes. He had Min-jae's quiet, serious face. Slowly, the boy turned, and Min-jae saw her. Kamsi, his ex-wife. 6 years ago, the most feared mafia boss in Seoul made one choice that broke everything. He thought he was protecting the woman he loved. Instead, he lost her and a son he never knew existed. Kamsi's eyes met his across the terminal. Her face went pale. Her hand tightened around the boy's small fingers. In that single second, Min-jae's entire empire meant nothing. All that mattered was the truth standing 6 feet away from him in a small boy's face. And for the first time in 6 years, the feared boss of Seoul felt afraid. Before we get into how a mafia king lost the 2 people he loved most, comment below. Have you ever made a decision out of fear that you later regretted? To understand how Min-jae lost everything, you have to understand where he came from. He grew up with nothing. No parents. No home. Just the streets of Seoul, where only the strong survived. By the time he was 20, he had clawed his way into the city's most dangerous gang. By 30, he ran it. People feared him. They bowed to him. They obeyed every word he said. But underneath the expensive suits and the cold stare, Min-jae was hollow. He had power, money, and respect. He did not have peace. He believed one thing above all: love makes you weak. Love gives your enemies a target. He had seen it happen to other bosses, their families used against them, their loved ones kidnapped, hurt, or worse. So Min-jae built walls. He let no one close. Then he met Kamsi. Kamsi Okafor was a Nigerian exchange student studying art in Seoul. She was far from home, in a country where she stood out everywhere she went. But she did not care. She was confident, independent, and unimpressed by powerful men. When Min-jae first tried to charm her with money and gifts, she laughed in his face. "I'm not interested in your wallet," she told him. "I want to know who you are without it." No one had ever said that to him before. His men warned him to stay away. They said love made men weak, and weak men got killed in their world. Min-jae did not listen. For the first time, he did not care what his men thought. Slowly, something in him began to soften. He started visiting her studio, just to watch her paint. Her paintings were full of color and light, everything Min-jae's world was not. Standing among her canvases, he felt something he had not felt in years: safety. He started talking, really talking, for the first time in years. With Kamsi, he was not a mafia boss. He was just a man. They fell in love. Deeply. Completely. On their wedding day, Min-jae stood at the altar without bodyguards, without weapons, without armor of any kind. For one single day, he let himself be just a husband. It was the happiest day of his life. But the streets do not forget. And somewhere, his enemies were already watching. Haven't we all, at some point, loved someone the world told us we shouldn't? 3 months into their marriage, Kamsi turned their living room wall into a mural. Bright orange suns. Deep green hills. Tiny golden birds in flight, a piece of Nigeria, painted right in the middle of Seoul. One evening, she finished the final bird on the mural and stepped back, paint on her fingers, grinning with pride. Min-jae stood in the doorway watching her, his tie already loosened, forgetting completely about the men waiting downstairs for his return. Min-jae would come home late most nights, his phone buzzing with calls from men who answered only to him. But some nights, he turned that phone off completely. He would walk in quietly, take off his jacket, and sit at the table just to watch Kamsi cook. "You're staring again," she would say, laughing. "Can't a husband admire his wife?" he would answer. Those were the nights he loved most. No meetings. No threats. No blood. Just rice, her laughter, and the smell of paint still drying on the wall. For a few months, it felt like Min-jae had found a way to live 2 lives, the boss the city feared, and the husband who came home to peace. It was the only home he had ever wanted. Then, one morning, everything changed. Kamsi opened the front door to get the newspaper and found an envelope instead. Inside was a single photograph of her, taken just days earlier, outside her favorite coffee shop. A thick red circle had been drawn around her face. No note. No name. Just the photo and the circle. She brought it straight to Min-jae, her hands trembling. He looked at it for only a second before his expression went completely flat, the same cold mask he wore for his enemies. "It's nothing," he said. "Just someone trying to scare us. Forget it." But that night, after Kamsi fell asleep, Min-jae sat awake at the kitchen table, staring at the photo for hours. By morning, he had doubled the guards outside their home. He changed her driver. He started checking the street from the window before she ever stepped outside. He told her none of it. Slowly, Min-jae began pulling back. He answered fewer questions. He came home later. He stopped sitting with her at dinner, choosing instead to work in his office with the door closed. Kamsi noticed every bit of it. She didn't know about the photo. She didn't know about the guards, or the new driver, or the calls Min-jae was making at 3 in the morning. All she knew was that the husband who used to watch her cook now barely looked at her at all. Something was wrong. She just didn't know what. 2 weeks later, the warning became real. Director Choi, the head of a rival syndicate creeping into Min-jae's territory, made his first real move. He didn't attack Min-jae directly, that would have been too easy to answer. Instead, he took Tae-sung, Min-jae's right-hand man and oldest friend, straight off the street in broad daylight. The message was simple, delivered through a single phone call. "Everyone you love is within my reach. Your friend tonight. Your wife tomorrow, if you don't remember your place." Min-jae didn't sleep that night. He gathered every man loyal to him and tore through the city, warehouse by warehouse, until he found where Choi was holding Tae-sung. The rescue was brutal. Min-jae walked away with a deep cut along his ribs and 3 broken fingers. Tae-sung walked away alive barely. He had been beaten for 2 days straight, just to prove a point. Lying in a hospital bed beside his friend, Min-jae finally understood something he had refused to accept. Choi hadn't attacked Tae-sung because Tae-sung was important. He'd attacked Tae-sung to send a message about who really mattered to Min-jae. Min-jae sat by his friend's bed for 3 days straight, refusing to leave, changing his own bandages himself rather than letting the nurses near him. He kept thinking the same thought, over and over. If Choi could reach Tae-sung this easily, reaching Kamsi would be even simpler. She had no training, no guards she knew about, no idea how dangerous her own husband's enemies could be. Kamsi was the obvious next target. The most obvious of all. That night, Min-jae made a decision he believed would save her life, even though it would destroy his own. He decided he had to push her away. Not protect her by holding on tighter, but by letting her go completely, so that no enemy would ever think to use her against him again. Over the following weeks, Min-jae grew colder. He skipped dinners without explanation. He answered her questions in short, clipped sentences. He stopped reaching for her hand in public. Kamsi tried everything. She cooked his favorite meals. She left small notes in his jacket pockets. She asked him directly, more than once, if something was wrong. One night, she sat across from him at dinner and simply asked, "Did I do something wrong?" Min-jae looked at her, really looked at her, and felt his resolve nearly break. He wanted to tell her everything, the photo, the kidnapping, the fear that lived in him every hour of every day. Instead, he just shook his head and looked back down at his plate. Each time, Min-jae lied to her face. "I'm just tired," he would say. "Business is difficult right now." Around this same time, an old face reappeared in Min-jae's orbit, Han Seo-yeon, his first love before Kamsi, now a rising actress returning briefly to Seoul for a film premiere. Seo-yeon represented everything Kamsi's marriage to Min-jae was not: safe, simple, free of danger. She came from his world, understood his world, and would never need protecting from it. Their meetings were brief and entirely professional, old friends catching up over coffee, nothing more. But to Min-jae, in his most exhausted, frightened moments, Seo-yeon's presence whispered a tempting idea. Maybe the safer path was the one he should have chosen from the start. He pushed the thought away every time. But it kept returning. Min-jae was no longer protecting his marriage. He was quietly preparing to end it, convinced, in his own broken logic, that losing Kamsi was the only way to keep her alive. Director Choi is about to make Min-jae do the one thing he swore he'd never do. Drop a fire if you think love should come before fear. The papers arrived on a Tuesday morning, sitting on the kitchen table where breakfast used to be. Kamsi picked them up slowly, reading the words twice before they made sense. Divorce. Her name. Min-jae's signature, already signed. What is this? She whispered. Min-jae stood by the window, his back to her, his voice flat. It's over. I don't think this is working anymore. That's it? No explanation? After everything. He didn't turn around. There's nothing to explain. I'm sorry. Kamsi searched his face for any sign that this was a lie, a mistake, anything. She found nothing. Just the same cold mask he wore for his enemies, now turned on her. She didn't beg. She didn't cry in front of him, though the tears were already burning behind her eyes. She simply nodded, packed one suitcase, and left the home she had painted with her own hands. She took nothing else. Not the jewelry. Not the money he offered. Not even the truth. He did not walk her to the gate. He could not bear getting that close. Instead, he stood on the rooftop of a building near the airport, alone, watching the runway from a distance, close enough to see, far enough to convince himself he was already letting go. He watched her plane taxi, lift, and disappear into the clouds. He told himself this was protection. He told himself she would be safe now, far from Choi, far from danger, far from a life that could get her killed. He told himself this was love. But standing there, watching the last piece of his happiness vanish into the sky, Min-jae felt nothing like a protector. He felt like a man who had just destroyed the only good thing he had ever built. 3 weeks later, in a small apartment in Lagos, Kamsi sat alone on her bathroom floor, staring at a small plastic test in her shaking hands. 2 lines. She pressed a hand to her stomach and let out a sound that was half sob, half disbelieving laugh. She had no husband to tell. No family nearby. No one to call. Just herself and the secret growing inside her, a piece of the marriage Min-jae had thrown away, one he didn't even know existed. He thought he was saving her life. He had no idea he was erasing his own family from it. 6 years passed. Min-jae had crushed every enemy who once threatened him. Director Choi was gone, defeated, exiled, erased from the city's power structure entirely. Min-jae's empire now stretched across 3 industries, untouchable on paper, respected even by the police who once hunted him. On the outside, he had won everything. On the inside, he had nothing. He filled his evenings with meetings that meant nothing and parties he didn't enjoy. He told himself the hollow feeling in his chest was just exhaustion. It never went away. Then Han Seo-yeon came back into his life. She had spent the last few years building a film career in the United States, and now she was returning to Seoul as one of Korea's most celebrated actresses. They reconnected slowly, carefully, 2 old friends easing back into familiar rhythms. Min-jae told himself this made sense. Seo-yeon understood his world completely. She never asked uncomfortable questions. She never needed protecting. With her, life felt simple, controlled, safe. He convinced himself this was the life he was finally owed, a quiet, stable love, free of the danger that had cost him everything once before. He never let himself think about Kamsi. Not directly. Not on purpose. Half a world away, in Lagos, a 6-year-old boy named Ji-woo sat in a hospital room while doctors spoke quietly to his mother. The diagnosis was a rare blood disorder, one that required a very specific kind of treatment. A bone marrow match. A family donor. Kamsi gave blood samples without a second thought. The doctors ran every test they could. Then came the results. No match. Not from her side, not from anyone in her family. A specialist leaned forward gently. Is there anyone on the father's side we could test? Even someone you haven't spoken to in years. Kamsi sat in silence for a long moment, 6 years of buried memory rising to the surface all at once. She had one option left. The one person she had sworn never to contact again. For Jinwoo's sake, she booked a flight back to Korea. Fate, it seemed, was done waiting. There was no army, no fortune, and no secret skill that could fix what was coming. The only weapon left in this story was the truth, and it was about to force itself into the open, whether either of them was ready or not. You already know what's about to happen at that airport. Comment your prediction before the next part. Were you right? The VIP terminal buzzed with quiet luxury, soft announcements, polished floors, the smell of expensive coffee. Min-jae stood near the gate, waiting for Seo-yeon's flight, when a small voice cut through the noise. "Mama, can we get ice cream after this?" He turned, and the world tilted sideways. A boy, maybe 6 years old. Dark, warm eyes. A jaw that belonged to Min-jae's own father, passed down like an inheritance. The boy's serious little face was unmistakably, impossibly his. Beside the boy stood Kamsi. 6 years had changed nothing about the way Min-jae's chest tightened at the sight of her. "Kamsi," he said, barely above a whisper. She froze mid-step, color draining from her face. The boy looked between them, confused. "Mama? Who is that?" Min-jae's legs moved before his mind caught up. He crossed the terminal in seconds, stopping just short of them, staring down at the child like he was trying to memorize a dream before it disappeared. "How old is he?" His voice cracked. "6, Kamsi answered, barely audible. Min-jae's hands began to shake. "Is he mine?" Kamsi opened her mouth. Nothing came out. Her silence stretched on, painful and complete, and it answered the question more clearly than any words ever could. That was when Seo-yeon arrived, her heels clicking to a stop a few feet away, taking in the entire scene at once. The trembling man, the silent woman, the boy with Min-jae's exact face staring up at both of them. Min-jae did not even notice her standing there. His eyes never left the boy's face, the same eyes, the same stubborn set of the jaw. 6 years of a life he never knew he had missed standing right in front of him. For 1 second, jealousy flickered through her. Then it faded into something quieter, sadder. She thought of every dinner where Min-jae's eyes had drifted somewhere far away. Every time he spoke about regret without saying her name. She understood now. She had never been his future. She had only ever been a placeholder for a grief he never let himself feel. Over the following weeks, Min-jae became a constant presence at the hospital. He learned the names of every nurse on Jinwa's floor. He sat through bone marrow tests, blood transfusions, and long nights when fever spiked without warning. While Jiwoo slept, Min-jae did what he did best, he investigated. Something about Kamsi's sudden return felt too convenient to certain old enemies. He pulled old contacts, called in favors he hadn't used in years, and traced a thin, careful trail through the city's underworld. What he found stopped his heart. A surviving faction of Choi's old network, smaller now, but still bitter, still hungry for revenge, had been watching Kamsi from the moment she landed in Korea. They knew about the hospital. They knew about Jinwa's treatment schedule. They knew exactly where mother and son slept each night. Their plan was simple and brutal: take the boy and finally force Min-jae to pay for the empire he had built on their losses. 6 years ago, this exact threat had made Min-jae push the people he loved away, believing distance was the only protection he could offer. This time, he made a different choice. Instead of disappearing, instead of building higher walls, Min-jae walked into a police station and laid everything on the table: names, locations, financial records connecting his own organization to crimes spanning over a decade. His lawyers begged him to stop. His own men called it suicide. Min-jae didn't listen. "They want to use my son against me," he told the lead investigator, his voice steady despite everything he was about to lose. "Then take everything. Take the company, the records, all of it. Just protect him." Over the following days, raids tore through warehouses Min-jae had once controlled completely. Old allies were arrested. The remaining faction, exposed and scattered, collapsed entirely under the weight of evidence Min-jae himself had provided. He lost the empire he had spent his entire life building. He didn't lose a single night of sleep over it. For the first time in years, Min-jae had chosen his family over his power, completely, irreversibly, without looking back. In the beginning, Jiwoo wanted nothing to do with him. "Where were you all these years?" the boy asked one afternoon, arms crossed, refusing to even look at him. "Mama said I didn't have a father." The question landed like a blow. Min-jae had survived gunfights and 6 years of war, but nothing had ever hurt like the honest anger of a 6-year-old boy. He knelt down to Jinwoo's level instead of standing over him. "I thought I was protecting your mother," he said quietly. "I was wrong. I lost both of you because I was afraid. That's the truth, and you deserve to hear it." Jiwoo didn't answer. But he didn't walk away either. Slowly, over weeks of hospital visits, something began to shift. It started small, a shared soccer ball in the hospital courtyard, Min-jae letting Jiwoo win every single game without ever admitting it. Then came afternoons building model airplanes on a tray table between treatments, glue on their fingers, paint on their sleeves. Jiwoo started saving his favorite stickers for Min-jae's visits. He started watching the door for him before his scheduled time. One evening, after a difficult round of treatment left Jiwoo exhausted and pale, Min-jae carried him back to his hospital bed and tucked the blanket around his shoulders. Half asleep, Jiwoo mumbled 4 words that broke something open in Min-jae's chest. "Good night, Appa." "Not that man. Not him. Appa." Min-jae sat by the bed long after Jiwoo had fallen asleep, crying silently for the first time since he was a child himself. Outside the hospital, Min-jae's old life was unraveling completely. He sold off what remained of his criminal holdings, cooperated fully with every investigation, and started something new, a legitimate security company built to protect ordinary families from the kind of danger he once represented. It was smaller, quieter, honest. It was, for the first time in his life, something he was genuinely proud of. Months later, Jinwoo's treatment succeeded completely. The doctors confirmed it with smiles Min-jae would remember for the rest of his life. To celebrate, he took Kamsi and Jiwoo back to the one place where their story had truly begun again, the airport, the same terminal, the same gate. Travelers slowed. Phones came out. A small crowd gathered as the once feared boss of Seoul got down on one knee in front of them all, holding Kamsi's hands in his. 6 years ago, I let fear destroy our family, he said, his voice carrying further than he intended. Give me the rest of my life to make it right. Jiwoo, grinning ear to ear, shouted loud enough for the entire terminal to hear, "Mom." "Say yes." Laughing through tears, Kamsi nodded. "Yes." The crowd erupted into applause. As Min-jae slid the ring onto her finger, Jiwoo wrapped his small arms around both of them at once. For a man who once ruled through fear, this was his truest power of all, standing in public, with nothing left to hide, choosing love in front of the whole world. Every story like this leaves behind a lesson, and this one is simple, even if it took 6 wasted years to learn it. Min-jae once believed that protecting the people he loved meant pushing them away. He thought distance was safety. He thought silence was strength. He thought a closed door could keep danger out, when really, it only kept his family out too. It took losing 6 years he could never get back to learn the truth. Real protection isn't distance, it's showing up, even when it's terrifying. Think about that for a moment. Showing up when you're scared. Staying when leaving feels easier. Saying the hard thing instead of disappearing behind a locked door. That's what real love asks of us, not perfect strength, not control over every danger, but the courage to stay present, even when staying is the harder choice. Min-jae spent years building an empire that made grown men tremble at the sound of his name. He had warehouses, contracts, soldiers loyal only to him. None of it meant anything in the end. Power can build an empire. It can't build a family. Only honesty can do that. In the end, the man who once ruled through fear found something far more valuable on a small soccer field in a hospital courtyard, in 4 whispered words at bedtime, in a single yes spoken through tears at an airport gate. He found out, far too late but not too late to matter, that the people who truly love us were never asking for our power. They were only ever asking for us fully, honestly present. And that brings us to the end of Min-jae and Kamsi's story. A mafia boss who once believed fear could protect the people he loved, until it cost him 6 years he could never reclaim. A son who grew up not knowing his father's face, until fate placed them in the same terminal on the same ordinary afternoon. A woman who carried a secret alone for years, never once asking for anything in return. In the end, the most powerful man in Seoul learned that real strength isn't found in warehouses, weapons, or fear. It's found in showing up, in telling the truth, in choosing the people you love, even when it costs you everything you built. Stories like this remind us that it is never too late to choose honesty over fear. If this story moved you, let us know which moment hit hardest, the airport reveal or the proposal. Comment, like, and subscribe for more stories where the past always finds its way home. Drop a red heart if you believe people can change when it truly matters, and tell us in the comments what you would have done in Minjae's place. See you in the next one.